The jungle at night is not silent. It breathes, it pulses, and it hides secrets darker than the sky above it. Deep in the Amazon, even the bravest explorers whisper that the forest has a life of its own, watching, listening, waiting. For years, scientists from around the world had come here to study rare plants and undiscovered species. But this expedition was different. They did not come chasing butterflies or exotic frogs. They came following a signal, one that no one could explain, a faint pulse picked up on geological scanners, something artificial buried where no human had ever set foot. The team expected ruins, maybe even forgotten tools from an ancient tribe. But what they found was unlike anything written in history. Their journey began with helicopters slicing through a storm-filled sky, bringing them to a stretch of green so dense that even satellites had failed to capture what was inside. From above, the jungle looked endless, swallowing rivers and mountains in its grip. On the ground, it felt like entering another world. Air thick with moisture, insects swarming in clouds, and roots twisting into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, as if the forest was warning them not to go further. Among the group was a geologist who had spent his life studying the Amazon basin. He had always believed there were cities beneath the jungle, older than any known civilization. His theories were dismissed as fantasy until now. As the team cut deeper into the wilderness, they began to notice strange patterns. Massive stones hidden under vines, carved with markings that did not match any known indigenous art. Some looked like maps, others like warnings. The scientists grew restless, their curiosity colliding with unease. Every step further into the green abyss felt like a step away from safety. By the third day, the forest grew unnervingly silent. No birds called, no animals stirred. The group followed their instruments to a hill that looked ordinary from afar, but radiated unusual readings. Beneath it, the scanners revealed hollow chambers stretching hundreds of meters below. It was impossible, yet the data did not lie. The team set up camp and prepared to dig, unaware that once they crossed that line, there would be no turning back. Night fell heavy and oppressive. Rain lashed against their tents, thunder rolled through the canopy. But it wasn't the storm that kept them awake, it was the sound. From deep within the earth came a hollow hum, rhythmic, almost mechanical. Some said it was the echo of water, others claimed it was the earth itself vibrating. But one of the younger scientists whispered that it sounded like breathing. At dawn, they began the excavation. Soil gave way to stone, stone gave way to something smooth, something polished. What they uncovered was a sealed entrance, vast and cold to the touch, like metal but older than anything man had ever forged. It bore no rust, no cracks and no weakness. Just symbols, sharp, geometric, repeating in a pattern that none of them recognized. The geologist insisted it was older than the pyramids. Another claimed it was not human at all. The team argued, theories clashing in the heat, but their voices trembled with fear they refused to admit. If this structure was truly ancient, it rewrote everything. If it was not, then something else had built it. Something not from here. As the sun disappeared behind the canopy again, the entrance began to shift on its own. Slowly, with a grinding sound that made the earth quake, it opened. A cold wind rushed out, carrying a smell of decay, as though something inside had been waiting for them all along. And in that moment, the scientists realized they had not discovered a ruin. They had disturbed a secret. The ground trembled as the massive stone door cracked open, releasing a current of air that felt both ancient and unnatural. The scientists froze, their flashlights shaking in their hands. None of them had expected it to move on its own. The hum that had haunted them during the night grew louder, now vibrating in their bones. For a long moment, no one dared to breathe. They were staring into a darkness that looked alive, a void that seemed to stare back at them. The geologist, his voice barely above a whisper, urged the team forward. "We have to see what's inside," he said, though his tone betrayed more fear than courage. The others hesitated. Logic screamed at them to stop, to record their discovery and leave. But human curiosity is stronger than reason. One by one, they switched on headlamps and stepped into the black mouth of the hill. The The tunnel stretched downward, impossibly smooth, as if carved by precision machines. No tool marks, no natural erosion. Just polished walls that reflected their light in strange patterns. Every echo of their footsteps sounded wrong, too sharp, too delayed, like something else was walking alongside them. Deeper they went, until the air grew cold enough to see their breath. The Amazon outside was hot, humid, alive with insects. Down here it felt like stepping into another world, one untouched by time. Suddenly, their instruments began to fail. Compasses spun wildly. Communication radios hissed with static, and even the batteries drained faster than they should. One scientist muttered that the magnetic field was distorted. Another suggested radiation, but none had a real explanation. Then came the carvings. Symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly as their lights hit them. Some resembled stars, others looked like creatures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. The linguist among them tried to copy the shapes, his hands trembling, but he stopped halfway. He swore one of the symbols moved. The others laughed nervously, desperate to believe it was a trick of the light, yet each secretly feared the same thing, that the walls were alive. After what felt like hours, the tunnel widened into a massive chamber. Their beams swept across it, revealing structures that made no sense. Columns that curved like bones, platforms suspended without support, and in the center, a monolithic slab. Its surface shimmered as though made of liquid, yet remained solid to the touch. When one of the scientists pressed her hand against it, the hum shifted. Louder, deeper, like the heartbeat of something waking up. Panic rippled through the group. Some wanted to retreat, but the geologist argued they had found the most important discovery in human history. "If we leave now," he said, "someone else will uncover it, and the truth will be lost to us." His words carried weight, but not enough to silence the dread crawling through their minds. Because none of them could explain what they were feeling, an overwhelming sense that they were not alone. The air thickened. A vibration rolled through the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. The shimmering slab began to pulse with light, dim at first, then brighter, faster, as if responding to their presence. One scientist stumbled back, swearing it was a machine. Another whispered the word no one wanted to hear: portal. The hum became a roar, rattling their teeth, filling their heads with pressure. Some clutched their ears, others collapsed to their knees. Then, in a single blinding flash, the chamber went silent. The slab no longer pulsed. The symbols no longer glowed. The tunnel behind them seemed to vanish into pitch black, as though the forest above had sealed them inside. They had come seeking answers. Instead, they had awakened something that did not want to be found. The silence after the blinding flash was worse than the roar that had preceded it. The chamber, moments ago vibrating with energy, now felt like a tomb. The scientists looked around in disbelief, their breaths echoing too loudly in the stillness. Some rubbed their eyes, others tapped their failing instruments, desperate for an explanation. But the truth pressed down heavier than the stone above them. Something had shifted. The air felt charged, almost electric, and yet a chill crept up their spines, as if they were being watched. The geologist tried to steady the group, insisting they document everything. But when he aimed his camera at the slab, the lens fogged instantly, distorting the image. The photographs came out blank, nothing but static and smears of light. He cursed under his breath. It was as if the chamber itself refused to be recorded. Another scientist attempted to collect a sample from the wall. The moment his chisel touched the surface, the metal snapped clean in half, as if the stone rejected contact. Fear gnawed at the group's resolve. They whispered theories in shaky voices: alien technology, a hidden civilization, even a natural phenomenon unknown to science. But none could explain the feeling clawing at the edges of their minds. A sensation of being probed, measured, and judged. One of the younger members suddenly dropped her notebook, her eyes wide. She swore she saw movement in the far corner, a shadow that slipped against the wall. Flashlights swept across the chamber, catching nothing. Yet the impression lingered, a presence beyond sight. The linguist returned to the glowing symbols, which had dimmed after the flash. He traced them carefully with his fingers, muttering that they weren't just language. They were instructions. His face drained of color as he deciphered fragments. Words like sealed, warning, and sacrifice appeared in his rough translation. He stumbled back, insisting that the chamber was never meant to be opened. The others dismissed his panic at first, but doubt grew in their eyes. Then came the sound. At first, faint, like dripping water. But it grew louder, heavier, rhythmic, as if something large was moving deeper in the structure. The team froze, straining to hear. It was not footsteps, too slow, too heavy. It was something dragging itself, pulling across stone. The biologist whispered that perhaps it was a creature trapped inside. The possibility only worsened their dread. One scientist broke and sprinted toward the tunnel, only to stop dead in her tracks. The passage they had entered was gone. In its place stood a wall of unbroken stone, seamless and smooth, as though it had never been opened. Panic erupted. They hammered at the wall, screaming for escape, their voices swallowed by the chamber. No sound carried back. It was as though the forest above had abandoned them. In their frenzy, one of them tripped near the central slab. His blood smeared across its shimmering surface. The moment the red touched the stone, the hum returned. Deeper, stronger, vibrating through their bones. The slab lit up again, this time not in pulses but in a slow, deliberate rhythm. A heartbeat. The group backed away, terrified, but there was nowhere to go. The symbols reignited across the walls, casting the chamber in an eerie glow. The linguist screamed, shouting that the final phrase had revealed itself. The door is not to be opened, for what is sealed is not of this earth. And yet, they had opened it. As the heartbeat grew louder, the dragging sound returned, closer now, echoing from the depths beyond the chamber. The scientists clutched one another, trembling, realizing too late that they were not alone. Something was coming. Something that had waited in the dark for centuries, maybe millennia, for someone to free it. The air inside the chamber thickened until every breath felt like drowning. Sweat trickled down the scientists' faces, but their skin prickled with cold. The dragging sound was no longer distant. It scraped closer, echoing against the walls with agonizing slowness. Each vibration crawled through their bones. No one dared move. Their flashlights shook, beams flickering, searching for the source. Then, in the farthest shadow, something stirred. At first, it was only an outline, too large, too distorted to make sense. The linguist whispered, voice cracking, "It is awake." His words sent a shiver through the group. From the darkness, two faint glows emerged, like eyes reflecting light. They weren't human, not even animal, but something deeper, colder. The glows blinked in perfect rhythm, with the heartbeat pulsing from the slab. One scientist dropped her light, and the beam rolled across the floor. For a moment, they saw it clearly, a form slithering low, dragging a body of impossible length across the stone. Its skin shimmered like wet obsidian, glistening as if oozing with liquid. Where limbs should have been, there were appendages, spindly, jointed too many times, scraping sparks against the ground. And its face, if it could be called that, was smooth and featureless, save for the hollow sockets glowing from within. Panic shattered their silence. The biologists screamed to run, even though there was nowhere to run to. The group scattered across the chamber, their cries bouncing back at them, blending with the roar of the heartbeat. Some clawed at the sealed wall, tearing fingernails bloody. Others stumbled into the carved columns, desperate to hide. But the creature moved without haste. It didn't need speed. It knew they were trapped. The geologist, still clutching his broken chisel, shouted for everyone to stay calm, insisting they had to understand it, not fear it. His voice was drowned out by another scream. A young scientist dragged across the floor by one of the creature's spindly limbs. She kicked, thrashed, begged, but the limb tightened with unnatural strength, pulling her toward the slab. The others lunged to help, only to recoil when the slab itself seemed to melt, a surface rippling like liquid mercury. It swallowed her whole. In seconds she was gone. Horror rooted them in place. The slab pulsed brighter, faster, as if feeding. The linguist sobbed, insisting the chamber wasn't a tomb. It was a prison. The carvings weren't stories of gods or rituals. They were warnings left by those who had sealed this thing away. They hadn't built a monument. They had built a lock. The creature turned its glowing sockets toward the survivors, and the chamber grew colder still. Their breath turned to frost. Radios crackled back to life, but instead of static, a deep voice echoed through them, distorted and inhuman. The words were unclear, yet carried intent. It wasn't speaking. It was learning, copying, testing their fear. One scientist in desperation hurled a flare toward the creature. The red light burst across its body, revealing details too horrific to comprehend, markings etched into its skin like scars, some resembling the very symbols on the walls. But the flare did nothing to harm it. Instead, the thing recoiled only slightly, then let out a sound that shook the chamber. Not a roar, not a scream, but something lower, like laughter vibrating from the stone itself. The geologist collapsed to his knees, staring at the glowing slab. His voice cracked as he admitted the unthinkable. "We haven't discovered history. We've unleashed it." And as the creature began to advance again, dragging itself closer, every member of the team knew there would be no escape. The Amazon had not been hiding life. It had been hiding death. The chamber shook as if the very earth wanted to collapse and bury what had been unleashed. The heartbeat thundered now, not just through the slab but through the walls, the floor, even their own chests. Each thud felt like it would tear their hearts apart. The creature slithered forward, its grotesque limbs scraping sparks from the polished stone, glowing sockets fixed on the group of trembling scientists. It didn't need to move fast. Fear rooted its prey in place. One scientist snapped, screaming incoherently, and hurled her equipment bag at the thing. The metal instruments clattered uselessly at its side. The creature paused, not out of pain, but out of curiosity. Slowly, unnervingly. The geologist tried again to rally the team, his voice breaking. "We need to think. There has to be a way to seal it again." But his words were drowned out by another cry. One of the younger scientists seized mid-sentence, dragged screaming toward the slab. Her nails screeched against the stone floor, leaving trails of blood, until the rippling surface swallowed her whole. The slab brightened once more, the heartbeat steady, satisfied. Terror turned to chaos. Some scientists begged aloud, others pounded the walls with bloody fists. Radios crackled again, this time carrying their own voices back at them, twisted and delayed. Their screams echoed through the devices like a cruel playback. The linguist, trembling and pale, clutched his notes. He shouted above the din, "The symbols! They're not just warnings, they're instructions! There must be a ritual, a way to close it." He pointed frantically at the glowing carvings, but his words dissolved into despair as the shapes began shifting on their own, rearranging, rewriting themselves. It was then they realized the truth: the instructions were not for humans. They were for the creature. The air turned icy, every exhale a plume of mist. The creature rose taller, unfolding its twisted limbs until it loomed over them like a nightmare-given flesh. One scientist collapsed from sheer shock, her eyes vacant, as if her mind had snapped under the weight of what she was seeing. The rest huddled together, instinctively clinging to one another, though they knew no closeness could protect them. The linguist whispered through his tears, "This is why no one found it before. The jungle kept it hidden. It wasn't chance. It was protection." His words died as the creature's hollow sockets fixed on him. In an instant, one limb pierced his chest. He gasped once, eyes wide, before being dragged lifeless into the slab. Now only 3 remained: the geologist, the biologist, and the last surviving assistant. They stumbled backward, desperate, but there was no exit, no crack, no salvation. The slab pulsed violently, each flash illuminating the chamber like lightning. The assistant screamed, her voice shrill and broken, as she was seized and consumed in seconds. The geologist, shaking, stared at the slab as if in a trance. His voice was hoarse but steady. "It's feeding, it needed us. That's why it called us here." His eyes glazed with hopelessness. He turned to the biologist, who was sobbing uncontrollably. "If it gets out, the forest won't hold it. Nothing will." But there was no time to finish his thought. The creature surged forward, limbs wrapping around both men. They thrashed, screamed, but the slab swallowed them all the same, sealing their fates. Then, silence. The chamber returned to stillness, the hum fading into the cold stone. The slab dimmed, its glow retreating until only darkness remained. The forest above stirred again, birds calling faintly, as if nothing had happened. To the outside world, the scientists had simply vanished. Equipment abandoned, camp overgrown, names lost to missing persons reports. And yet, deep beneath the Amazon jungle, the slab pulsed once more. Slow, patient waiting. It had fed, and it would call again. The Amazon has always been called the lungs of the earth, a place of life, mystery, and survival. But what those scientists uncovered was not life. It was something that defied the very idea of existence. Their discovery should have been a triumph, a rewriting of history, a revelation about the hidden depths of our world. Instead, it became a nightmare buried beneath the canopy, swallowed in silence. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The search teams that followed their trail found nothing but ruins of a camp, scattered tools, and notes that ended abruptly in jagged handwriting. No footprints, no evidence of struggle, no bodies. Just absence. The kind of absence that whispers rather than screams, the kind that unsettles rather than explains. Families waited for answers that never came. Governments filed the case as lost expedition, and the jungle reclaimed what was left. But the story did not end there. The world, however, moved on. Scientists debated whether it was an accident, an animal attack, or the jungle itself swallowing them whole. Skeptics dismissed the rumors of glowing carvings and vanishing tunnels as stress-induced hallucinations. Yet every so often, new expeditions mysteriously turned away from that same region. Equipment malfunctioned, drones crashed, satellites failed to capture images, as if the jungle itself conspired to hide its heart. And maybe that is the most terrifying part. Not that something was discovered, but that something was waiting. It did not follow them out. It did not need to. It had fed enough, and now it sleeps again, buried under centuries of soil and roots, waiting for the next curious mind, the next arrogant expedition, the next sacrifice. Because the Amazon is not just a forest. It is a keeper. It breathes, it protects, and it hides secrets that humanity is not meant to uncover. Some mysteries are not puzzles to be solved. They are warnings written in the language of silence. So, the next time you hear about an expedition gone missing in the Amazon, or a strange hum recorded deep in the jungle, ask yourself, was it truly the wilderness that took them? Or was it the slab beneath the earth, pulsing patiently, calling again? And if the jungle calls, would you dare to answer?